Okay, hello everybody. Today, finally, we get to continue on to part 4 of our series on ontological mathematics and the theory of everything. Part 4, monads and the singularity. So this is going to be a bit of a review with a few new concepts gently thrown in before we continue. So monads, what is a monad? So remember that a monad is an instance of a complete set of circlings or frequencies or energy. Okay, that's what a monad is. It's a unit instance of the complete mathematical spectrum of all circlings, which are, of course, frequencies, which are of course, energy. This is what energy is. That's base energy. That's what it is. We have now explained what energy is logically and, scientifically and mathematically, right? Wonderful, amazing, yes? So monads are thought. They're unit minds because they're made of circlings, which are basis thoughts, because, that comes back to the question, where does a circling occur? Is a circle occurring in space-time somewhere? It's like, no, this is occurring in thought. This is a theory of idealism, yes? So the circling is thought in and of itself. They're one and the same thing, okay? So the circling occurs not even in thought, it occurs as thought is a much better way to say it. So the circling occurs as thought. When you say circling occurs in thought, then people say, okay, well, why does a thought exist in the first place? And so they're kind of missing the point. It's a good question, though, actually. So I should be careful there and say that the circling occurs as thought. They're one and the same thing. Okay, so the monad is then mentally alive. It's both an object to other monads and a subject unto itself. So it perceives its own, has its own qualia, its own internal state, its own internal perceptions from the arrangements of its own circles. And yes, great. So they're both object and subject. So they're mentally alive. And of course, the other name for a monad is actually a soul. It is a soul. Yes, there you go. They are souls, and they can interact with each other. So that was a big part of Leibniz, Gottfried Leibniz, who developed the monadology theory, and of course calculus as well. And it was a big question as to whether or not they were he called it windowed or windowless. So if monads were windowless, that means that they never were able to interact with any other monads. Whereas if they were windowed, meaning they could open themselves to interaction with other monads, then that was a different thing. So are they windowed or windowless? So of course they're windowless. They can interact with other monads, and that is what creates the whole, a lot of things. The whole perception, subjectivity versus objectivity, and all that sort of great stuff. So where does the singularity then exist, and what is it? So of course the singularity is the collection of all monads. And how many monads are there? Well, there's an ontological infinity of them. It's probably just some very large number. It's probably not a bad infinity, but a good infinity of some type or another. So it's finite in some sense. Anyway, that's a big question in ontological mathematics that is beyond my pay grade, so to speak. So it's the singularity. The singularity is the collection of all monads. And where does it exist? Well, it exists in thought. So it doesn't actually exist anywhere. Like, it's not like it exists somewhere out in space-time or something, or the center of the universe or anything. It occurs as thought nowhere. Okay, basically nowhere, because ultimately, as we know, it reduces to nothing, right? It reduces to net nothing. So the singularity exists nowhere, yet everything exists inside it. And so that means that the singularity exists everywhere within itself. Yeah, a bit of hard concepts to understand, but that's the nature of unextended mind, right? Descartes talked about, extension, the space-time world that we inhabit, and we see extension around us. And then he talked about how mind is actually an unextended object. It exists, it's real, but it doesn't exist as an extended object in space-time. It's an unextended substance, yes? Okay, so the singularity exists everywhere within itself in his mind. And that makes, of course, everything local within the singularity, right? In terms of physics, that's important, right? Because it explains, quantum mechanics, the behavior of quantum mechanics, and quantum entanglement and things like that. Because in fact, in a singularity, everything is local because it's a singularity, and everything is on top of itself, communicating through itself instantaneously, all at once, everywhere. Yes, and the singularity, because there is no space there. It's just thought, a grand unit of thought. Yeah. So it is an immaterial frequency domain of thought, and that is what base existence is. You can call that state being, the state of being, I guess. It's eternal and exists forever because, of course, it's net nothing. It was never created and can never go out of being created, can never be destroyed. It does, however, create temporary universes. Our universe is temporary, and we'll sort of discuss ahead why it does this, just very briefly. And now here's an expression that sometimes you come across. You can check in, but you can never leave. So the idea here is that since a soul, a monad, is net nothing and requires nothing to create it, then is it possible to create a net nothing monad, a new one? Because it doesn't require any effort to create it. So perhaps if you knew the correct mathematics, if you knew the correct, how to balance the equation between positive and negative sort of potentials or values in both the real axis and the imaginary number axis, if you knew how to create maybe like an electromagnetic frequency, or you had a special kind of generator or something, perhaps you could just create a new monad somehow, because ultimately it's nothing, right? It doesn't require any effort to create. You don't actually have to create anything new, because it's nothing. So is there a way to just can you just like make some new circles to spin? Because ultimately it really requires no effort to do that. It doesn't require actually any energy to do that, because it reduces to net nothing. So if it's nothing, how come, and it requires no effort, then how come you can't just create a new monad out of nothing? And this would be then the idea of creating new souls, right? But maybe the solution to that question is that the whole idea of a monad in base existence is that it requires no effort to create, and they've existed eternally. So now we're talking about using some sort of effort or system to create a new soul, but isn't that, or a new monad? But that's kind of contradictory to the whole idea of what a monad is, and why and how they exist, and how existence exists at all, which is through net nothing, which requires no effort to create. It's sort of self-existent. So maybe in fact you can't actually create new souls, new monads. So this is the Hotel California idea of the hotel, right? I guess it's in that song. I should look up the lyrics, but anyway, it's the idea of a hotel that always has room. You can always check in, but you can never leave. There's always a new room available. So it kind of gets the idea that maybe you can, maybe sufficiently with sufficient understanding, you can create a new net nothing monad. But then the question is, well, how would that work? Because now you're using effort to create something, and the whole idea of a monad is that they exist effortlessly. Well, then maybe you do it with thought. Maybe you can just use your thought to create a new monad, and then that gets into occultism, where you create, what are they called? What are those things called that you create with your mind in magic? Wow, my mind is not working today. Anyway, apparently you can do this in magic, with occult practices. Yeah, you just create things out of your mind. So maybe that does create new life forms. Anyway, getting back to the idea of the Hotel California, the idea is that we are checked in as monads. We are checked in and we can't leave. We can never turn ourselves off. So then that gets into the question of, well, can a monad turn off its circles? Like, could you, with sufficient understanding, just say, I just don't want to exist anymore. Seen it all. Even if I haven't seen it all and experienced all, I understand what you guys are doing. It seems pretty ridiculous. I just want to go. Yeah. Can you turn off your circles? I wonder, right? Could you, with sufficient understanding of what you are and how you're made, just turn off your circles? Why can't you turn them off and just sort of stop existing? Like, stop existing at the soul level. I'm not talking about like, physical suicide, because apparently that just, you just find yourself in a different existence then. So what about turning off the circles of your base being, of your base existence? Can you do that? And what would happen? And you kind of have a hint of that idea in Star Trek Voyager, an episode where, remember, there's a war in the Q continuum, and some of the Qs wanted to stop existing because they were tired of it, remember? And so it was the whole thing as to whether or not the Qs should allow some other Qs to commit suicide and stop existing, right? Because Q is, in the Star Trek lore, they're these infinite and omnipotent beings, of great power and, magical, quote unquote, magical abilities and things like that. So anyway, lots of sort of esoteric stuff to discuss there. Yeah, let's continue. So existence is permanent, while universes are not. So of course we have to separate this universe from existence in and of itself, right? People always, especially scientific materialists and scientists, they always make the mistake of associating this universe with what existence is in and of itself. This universe is just a temporary creation that base existence has created. Base existence has existed infinitely. It's always been. It's infinitely years old. It's not trillions of years old. You know, this universe is billions of years old. So base existence is not trillions of years old. It's infinitely old. It's just permanently existent, right? This universe is only 13.7 billion years old. So this universe is something that's been created out of base existence, okay? So where did the energy come from to create the universe in the Big Bang? Well, it came from the thoughts of the monads in the singularity, okay? Because of course the thoughts of the monads in the singularity is what energy is. And so they dumped all that energy, or they used their thoughts to create this universe in the Big Bang with, of course, the laws of physics as we know them, and we'll discuss that in a future episode. Really fun stuff there. To create this universe to do some things in. Yeah, so why would they do this? So I don't want to be too cynical. I must have been in a bit cynical mood, and anyone who knows me knows that I can get extremely cynical on some of these issues that I struggle with. So, I mean, it's a bit cynical to say because they're bored, right? They do it because they're bored. I mean, it's a lot more than that. It's what else would base existence do? You exist infinitely and forever. Of course, I mean, think about it. We're talking about creating universes, right? It's just like I'm talking about this if it's so glib, you know, as if it's such a simple thing. We're creating universes, like the whole Big Bang and all the universe, right? So it's not a trivial thing. I mean, but I mean, we're talking about base existence, which is, you know, we're basically talking about God and what God can do, right? Because that's what basic. I mean, if you want to use a term for it, I mean, when I use that term, I'm not saying, you know, the Abrahamic God that thinks that Jews are the best people in the universe. No, that's obviously not the God. I'm talking about the deist concept, the intelligent sort of concept of, you know, an infinite being God or whatever. You know, that's what we would call the singularity, right? And so, yeah, you require, you know, obviously this thing is massive and powerful, and yeah, it can create whole universes, right? That doesn't mean that it wants us to think ridiculous things, right? About, you know, silly tribes from the Middle East that think ridiculous things about themselves. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what they create is very exciting and interesting and entertaining. And it's not really a matter of boredom. We're going to get more into this into a future episode. Maybe I'll just leave it at that. They create universes. I mean, uh, if you're an infinite God and you basically understand yourself fully, I mean, I'm using that term God in the deist sense. The singularity, right, is what I mean. So without a universe, it's in and of itself, and it is fully connected. It's totally local within itself, even though there's an infinite number of monads. They're all on top of each other. They're all completely interacting. They all exist as one. So what would you do other than, if you were in that state, what would you do other than create a universe where you're all different and you're all separated and you're all your own individual beings and you evolve your way back to a state of being all one together again in only the singularity, right? So some process like that occurs, yeah? And, you know, and of course you got to understand it from sort of a cosmic and infinite perspective too. If you're an infinite being and you are in the state of being, not in this universe, but you're in the state of being in the singularity, and you fully understand yourself and you fully understand and totally perceive 100%, you perceive it intellectually, you feel it, and it's 100% the most absolute knowledge that you could possibly ever have. That knowledge being that you are infinite, eternal, indestructible, and nothing can ever happen to you. Well, of course, what are you going to do but go and create scenarios where you experience death and murder and horror and dying and the fear of dying and all that? Of course, that's exactly what you would do. If you're an infinite being and you fully understand yourself and all existence, of course, the only thing to do is to create these sort of quote unquote playgrounds where you pretend that you can die and you pretend that you can be hurt and you can pretend that you can be destroyed and all this sort of stuff, right? And of course, you know, be retarded as well. You know, like people that know me know that I can't stand all the retardation in the world. God, the retarded people just freaking like, I'm just like surrounded in a sea of retardation, and it's just like I don't leave my house anymore because there's just so many retarded people. It's just like you go outside, you're gonna meet someone retarded doing something retarded, right? That's so bad. You know, look at what I've been dealing with. You know, with the whole climate alarm, climate change stuff, right? I've tried to talk to people who have PhDs in physics. Hope you didn't see that spittle. Really getting excited here. PhDs in physics and astrophysics and supposedly meteorology, and they don't understand what's wrong with flat earth theory and cold sunshine, right? I mean, these people are retarded. And I'm so sick of their retardation. But on the other hand, from the perspective of if you're an infinite being and you fully understand yourself and all that exists, of course you're going to create a scenario where you're completely retarded to see what being completely retarded is like. Let's go have fun and be completely retarded because I mean, what's going to be more fun than being completely retarded? I it just sort of reduces to that, doesn't it? Which is, unfortunately annoying for me, and I had that in my last book, Planet Wars. I'm like, why are people so retarded? We need to do something and we need to fix existence and fix, I don't know, is there some way to do that so that people aren't so retarded anymore? But, on the other hand, that's probably what we wanted to do from the perspective of existence in the singularity. We probably wanted to be retarded for a while because in the singularity, you're completely not retarded. You're completely 100% rational. You understand everything, understand yourself. You have to create this universe playground to see what it's like to be retarded, to pretend to die, to pretend to be afraid of being destroyed. All right, all that sort of stuff. Wow, this one is getting crazy. So how do they do this? Now, this is going to be really, really fun. In a couple episodes out, I think it starts, I got 4 or 5, I think on 6 or 7, I demonstrate how this works via the Fourier transform. It's so fun and so cool. Okay, here's a little saying for the Fourier transform. And I'll show you how this works. I'll do a bit. I'll get into a little bit more detail to show you how the mechanism works. Okay, in that future video. The most complex space-time structures can be decomposed to, or can originate from, the simplest possible ingredients, which are sinusoids, circles, circlings in the frequency domain. Ugh, it's just so cool. You guys are going to love it. I can't wait to show you that. A couple episodes out yet. Okay, got to get through a few more things. Yeah, really cool. So the Fourier transform, it resolves the mind, matter, substance dualism problem of Descartes. So Descartes had, postulated this problem of substances. Extended substance, which is space-time, matter, material, extended substance, versus the mind, which is an unextended substance. And then the problem was always, well, how do those two substances interact? Since they seem to be different substances. One is unextended, one is extended. How can they possibly interact since they are fundamentally different? So this produced what's called the Cartesian Dualism problem. And it was a long-standing problem in philosophy, which people still don't realize has been solved now in ontological mathematics. So the problem was, if mind is what exists and it is unextended, then whence come matter and extension? How does unextended mind interact with matter and extension and extended domain, given that they appear to be completely different substances? Well, the answer is in Fourier mathematics. Fourier mathematics shows how that can be done. So it provides philosophical idealism, a mathematical basis, showing that there can be a mathematical frequency domain, a mathematical domain of frequency, which can nevertheless produce the appearance of extension and space-time. I'll show you how that works. It's going to be so cool. Gosh, I can't wait till I get to that part. So it places idealism, philosophical idealism, on par with scientific materialism, and it also answers all the questions that materialism is currently totally stumped by and will never answer. I'm going to go through all those things. It's going to be really fun. Okay, so here's a link you can go check out just for fun, just to read a little bit. One of the fundamental, I wonder who wrote this. I mean, this site is the Fourier transform. No scientist would ever write the fundamental secrets of the universe. No, so I'm wondering who wrote this site, because it's a very interesting thing to say about the Fourier transform. No scientist would ever say that about the Fourier transform. Only an ontological mathematician would say that about the Fourier transform. So I really wonder who wrote that site. Good on them. But yeah, so that's from the site here. One of the fundamental secrets of the universe. All waveforms, no matter what you scribble or observe in the universe. So by waveforms, he actually means structures in the universe, rocks, people, bodies, planets, stars, sunlight, are actually just the sum of simple sinusoids of different frequencies. So I wonder if this person fully understands what he's saying. Sounds like it is, but sometimes people say intelligent things without realizing what they're saying, I guess. Anyway, one of the fundamental secrets of the universe, all waveforms, no matter what you scribble or observe in the universe, are actually just a sum of simple sinusoids of different frequencies. So I will show you in a couple episodes out exactly how that process works, okay? Going to be really cool. And here's another description of the Fourier transform from this site. What does a Fourier transform do? Given a smoothie, it finds the recipe. Alternatively, given a recipe, it can make a smoothie. The other way around. I'll show you how that works again. I keep on saying that. A couple episodes out. It's going to be really cool. Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so that's called the inverse Fourier transform when you have the recipe and you go to the smoothie. Okay, all right, cool. So I think that was it. Yes, so the next part that I want to do first is going to be part 5, the mind and the brain, consciousness and God explained. We touched on a little bit. I was using that term quite a few times in this episode, talking about God. And of course, I don't want to, mean any sort of silly idea of God. This is a philosophical idealist deist sort of idea of God. And, of course, he called it singularity. It's not at all the God that we would, you know, think in terms of, the Abrahamic faith, in terms of worship and all this sort of stuff. I mean, God in the philosophical idealist deist sense as, the singularity, the collection of all monads. Okay, anyway, we are going to explain how the mind and the brain work together, what consciousness is and why humans have a little bit of it, not much, tiny little bit. And we're going to explain God and how God relates to all that. Okay, with the proviso on what I mean by God. Yeah, all that explained. Okay, wonderful. And of course, this is all based upon the philosophical scientific treatise by Mike Hockney in his God series of books, which you can get on Amazon. Okay, guys, have a good day and take care. Bye-bye.